Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into, well, one of science fiction's absolute giants. We're going beyond Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the
Right.
philosopher king, you know. We want to look at the man behind the uniform, the one shaped by some really intense trauma, isolation, and just the sheer psychological weight of command.
Yeah, and our sources for this, they really synthesize his key psychological journey. We're focusing on those moments, those really iconic scenes that kind of chip away at that famous stoicism.
Mm.
Our mission today is to get under the skin, really understand how those deep personal wounds, the loneliness, the doubt, even the rage shaped him just as much as, say, his intellect or his diplomatic skill.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it, wrapped up in that Starfleet uniform. I mean, he's the absolute model of intellect, diplomacy, restraint, just ultimate cognitive control. But what the sources really dig into is something deeper. That stoicism, it's not just, his personality. It's painted as this highly effective but incredible costly defense mechanism, shielding profound vulnerability, and this is key, deep emotional repression.
Absolutely. I mean, when we first meet him, yeah, his core identity is all rationality, Starfleet ideals. He's the captain who talks first, shoots later, if at all. But like you said, the analysis shows that perfection, it comes at a massive cost. That vulnerability, the loneliness, the trauma he's pushed down, they're kind of the hidden engines driving that seemingly rock-solid emotional control.
Okay, so let's start there with the job itself, the sheer burden of it. The sources bring up something called role engulfment. And this isn't just like having a demanding job, right? This
Yeah.
is the job completely consuming the self.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how Picard's command doesn't just shape his professional hours. It absolutely devours his entire identity.
Mm.
He sticks rigidly to this almost monastic code in his head, a belief that the captain just cannot risk closeness, cannot risk emotional intimacy, not with the crew, maybe not with anyone. And this belief, it just creates this profound isolation around him.
But hang on a second. How do we draw the line between, necessary professional distance, which you need in command, and genuine emotional repression? Isn't some isolation just maturity when you're the one making life or death calls?
That's the critical difference, I think. Professional distance is, well, it's a boundary. Role engulfment is more like self-erasure. For Picard, the uniform, metaphorically, never comes off.
Yeah.
Not even in his private thoughts. Think about his hobbies, classical literature, archaeology. They're mostly solitary, right? He rarely, if ever, lets himself pursue real intimacy, family life. His identity is just locked to the title. Jean-Luc Picard, Captain, full stop. The pressures on the command become the pressures on his very soul.
Right. And when the job is the man, any attack on the ship or the mission, it becomes an existential threat to him personally. Which leads us pretty directly to the Borg.
Precisely. Nothing tests that definition of self more brutally than being assimilated into Locutus. This was the ultimate psychological violation. Not just capture, no, it was being stripped bare of identity.
Yeah.
His consciousness weaponized, forcing him to become this instrument of mass death against the very people, the very Federation he swore to protect.
That whole experience, best of both worlds, and then dealing with the aftermath in First Contact. The sources really detail how that trauma leads to classic PTSD symptoms. You see the flashbacks, the crushing guilt, those uncharacteristic flashes of pure rage.
Yeah, and this is where we need to bring in the concept of moral injury. It's crucial here. See, most people get PTSD as like the fear of being harmed again. Moral injury is deeper. It's that lasting psychological wound from being forced to do or witness or fail to stop actions that just fundamentally break your own core moral code.
So the sources are saying his violation wasn't just being exposed to violence, it was being forced to participate in atrocity.
Exactly right. He wasn't a bystander in that conflict. He was the weapon. His knowledge, his tactics, his voice all turned against his own side. That forced complicity. It means when he came back, he wasn't just carrying scars. He carried the unbearable knowledge of what he was made to do. The guilt over Wolf 359, that's pure moral injury, not just a tactical loss.
And you see that explode in First Contact, don't you? That absolute single-minded drive for revenge against the Borg Queen. He's willing to trash the temporal prime directive, sacrifice the Enterprise, just to get at the Borg. That is not the rational philosopher we know.
No way. That's the wounded veteran operating purely on trauma and rage. Remember that scene where Lily calls him out? Says he sounds just like the Borg he hates. That's the core insight. His trauma cracked his identity, and his mind, which relies so heavily on control, desperately tried to regain it through, righteous vengeance. It just shows how moral injury can warp even the most disciplined mind.
Okay, so the Borg shattered his identity, showing the captain wasn't immune to corruption from within, essentially. But if that tested his identity, then chain of command? That incident feels like the ultimate test of his grip on reality, his sheer will.
Arc 2, yeah. The Cardassian interrogation with Gul Madrid is just a masterclass in psychological coercion. The torture wasn't random, it was strategic, designed. It wasn't just about inflicting pain, it was about absolute control.
Tell us more about the design of that. Why the lights? What was the psychology there?
Well, Madrid shows Picard 4 clearly visible lights, but he demands relentlessly, under extreme duress, that Picard say there are 5. The goal was never information. It was ontological control, power over reality itself. If Madrid could force Picard to deny the objective truth right in front of his eyes, if his external reality could be rewritten by the torturer, then Madrid owned his mind completely.
It's the classic authoritarian playbook, isn't it? Accept my lie as your truth, or the suffering continues. And Picard resists. He gives us that legendary defiant scream. There are 4 lights. That's the moment we all remember, the peak of his resistance.
It is defiance, but the sources really push us to look at what comes immediately after, the moment that reveals the cost. It pulls him back from being just a symbol of resilience and shows us this profoundly human fragility.
Yeah.
It's his confession right after rescue, when he confides quietly, I was about to say there were 5.
Wow. Yeah, that one line. It might be the most vulnerable thing he says in the entire run. It shows that even this man, the one built on rigid self-control, was seconds away from accepting a total falsehood just to make the pain stop.
And this is where we talk about cognitive dissonance under coercion. Picard's mind was literally in agony, cognition A. He knew, objectively, 4 lights. Cognition B. The overwhelming need for the torture to end. The pressure was so unbearable his brain was actively preparing to create a new, false belief. Okay, there are 5 lights, just to resolve that internal conflict and get relief. It proves that even the strongest, most disciplined minds can be pushed to the breaking point, where reality itself starts to fray under that kind of targeted pressure.
So his resilience, then, it's not about being immune to damage. It's not about not feeling the pain. It's the ability to hold that line, even when his own mind is screaming at him to give in. Survival isn't always a clean win.
Absolutely not. It proves that perfectly. And this loops back to the man under the uniform. What did all that stoicism, all that restraint, actually cost him day to day? The sources point straight at loneliness. Deep, pervasive regret about intimacy never pursued.
Which is why his relationship with Gemin is so vital, isn't it? She's really the only one on the ship, maybe in his whole life, who operates outside that strict command hierarchy. She doesn't owe him anything.
Exactly. She provides that necessary safe space, emotionally. Guinan is the counterbalance to the role engulfment. She demands authenticity from him. When Picard is being the captain, he has to be infallible, articulate, rational. But with Guinan, he can actually drop the mask. He can admit fear or doubt or just simple human irritation.
And that weight of loneliness, it seems to get even heavier later in life, doesn't it? Especially when we see him in Star Trek, Picard.
Oh, absolutely. Once he leaves command, that role engulfment just collapses.
Yeah.
Suddenly the identity he relied on for decades is gone. And he's left facing vulnerability, mortality, and those deep regrets about the family, the intimacy he sacrificed for the job. A lot of that shows tension comes from him finally having to grapple with the emotional life he put on hold for so long.
Okay, let's try and bring these threads together then. Our deep dive has sort of given us these key psychological lenses for looking at Picard's leadership. What's the big picture synthesis from the source material?
Well, first, it's duty versus self. His command style demanded this profound self-erasure leading to isolation, and he paid a lifelong price for that. Second, trauma and endurance. Surviving the Borg, surviving the Cardassians, it redefined his strength. His leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about enduring trauma and still standing up, even though he's deeply scarred.
Right. And the final piece, that universal lesson maybe, truth versus power.
Definitely. The 4 lights moment. It works as this incredibly powerful metaphor, doesn't it, for resisting authoritarian control over reality itself. It shows that defending objective truth, insisting 4 lights are 4 lights, not 5 might be the hardest, but also the most necessary act of leadership there is, intellectually and emotionally.
So his strength, ultimately, it isn't the absence of fear or pain. It's the ability to stand against that internal voice screaming surrender, even when he feels like he's about to break.
He really shows us that the most disciplined mind can be pushed right to the edge, right to the brink of accepting a lie, and yet somehow still find the strength to defend what's real. Leadership always has a psychological cost. His stories is a profound testament to the price of that endurance.
And sometimes, that defensive truth, that fight against betraying yourself, It's as simple and as incredibly powerful as just insisting there are four lights.
That fight happens inside us long before it ever happens out loud.
We really hope this deep dive gave you maybe a fresh perspective on the philosopher captain and the incredible psychological load he carried. We want to leave you with this thought, reflecting on his story. Think about the lights in your own life. What objective truth about yourself, your reality, your core values are you absolutely unwilling to give up no matter how intense the pressure gets?
Because that decision, holding the line when every part of you wants relief, that's where real resilience is forged.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the source material.